I have about 40 years experience in managing communities.
Bob Mariani was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and graduated from San Diego State University. He began his career in community management as a portfolio manager, managing as many as 13 homeowners associations. His career took him to Fairbanks Ranch Homeowners Association, then to Arizona, where he managed Sun Lakes in Chandler and Sun City, Oro Valley in Tucson. His certifications include Master of Community Association Management and Professional Community Association Manager.
The first department that I wanted to go over with you is EMO. And when I go through some of this, what I think might be helpful is if I do compare, let's say the last place that I worked to this place, not that there's a right or a wrong, it'll be a way to kind of show you that not one size fits all when it comes to large-scale communities. There are incredible differences between this place and many other places. With our EMO, they have two different responsibilities, two major areas. One is basically the day-to-day maintenance, oversight of weeds and making sure that properties are up to par and aren't getting out of good maintenance order. The other side is the construction approval process. If you're doing some kind of an improvement to your property or you're building a home, it goes into EMO. And essentially the approval lies with the staff there. This is where there's a significant difference between the way that we do things and some other communities. More typical is that the committee actually does all the approvals, or most of them. Staff does minor approvals like simple black and white type of painting. If there are certain paint colors and you submit, staff could approve. Everything else is approved by the committee. Here it's the opposite in a sense, in that the committee approves variances. That's their main job, and the staff essentially does the rest of it. One of the challenges that we have, as you can imagine, is that we have a very small EMO staff. It's basically about 2 people. So to do a thorough job of inspecting the property on a continual basis and keeping everything in order is a real challenge. Most of the maintenance and the violations and that sort of thing are generated through reports from people, complaints or input. Not that our staff doesn't see some of that and follow up on it, because it's continual, they do. But an awful lot of it is, hey, if your neighbor's got some, if their house paint is falling off or they have weeds or whatever, then we get reports on that, and EMO follows up on that sort of thing. So basically, those are the 2 areas of responsibility. One other thing that they do is oversee the green waste, which is actually coming up in just a few days. So if you have some green waste that you've accumulated in your yard, take it over to the campground and they'll take it and haul it away. I know it's been utilized for years here, and it really is helpful for everybody to participate in that. One other thing with EMO, there is a new committee that's being developed, and it's basically to help with fire prevention. This committee, part of it will be getting volunteers together to do some inspections, and it'll be focused on reducing any fire potential. So, if there's overgrowth and that sort of thing, that's what they'll be looking at. And they'll report that to the EMO, and then there'll be follow-up and getting people to reduce their fire load, which is a real issue here. Fire potential is pretty high here, and there's a tremendous overgrowth in all areas. In fact, the house that I'm renting probably could be cut back about 50%. It's a real jungle. Let's go to security, which is always a hot topic. Everybody probably has security on their mind from time to time. With a gated community, which again, not all large-scale communities like this are gated, but when you have gates, guess what? One of the big responsibility of security is to control gate access. And it is a real challenge here, as you can imagine, because we have multiple types of access approvals. I mean, we have the basic of approval. I assume all of you are members, so all of you can have the barcodes on your vehicles or a card to get in. But then we have the guest passes that you can provide to your friends and family. We have 2 different kinds of passes for realtors. There's a broker pass and an agent pass in essence. We have 2 different kinds for contractors. If you're a general contractor, you can allow subs in. And so the generals have certain authority level, and the subs have a different kind of authority level. So you can see how you can't just put somebody on the gate out there and say, okay, go to work. It would be a disaster. They really do have quite a bit to learn in order to operate those gates properly. I think for the pay level, it's a tough job and a real challenge. And by and large, they do a pretty good job. Obviously, there are ways to take advantage of that access control, and some people do. And some of the rules that we're changing, like for example, the parking rules that we've put into place recently, that's helping to where far less contractors and vendors in that are able to park in the lots out here and say, go and use the lake for fishing or just family use, because they don't have the proper parking permits. So that's a huge area of responsibility, is that access control. The other, of course, is patrol. And most of patrol is for speeding. I think if Stonegate does anything really well right now, I have to say they do a good job at patrolling and citations for speeding. I mean, we get, anywhere from, probably around 50 to 80 citations a month. That's doing a good job. And the speed signs that we have out there, we get information data from those every month, and it shows that the vast majority of people here are going under 30 miles an hour, most of them right around 25. There's a small percentage that are clocked by those signs are going into the 40s, and a very small percentage that are going over that. Now, the other side of that is that I know when I see that sign, I tend to look at my odometer or speedometer and I might even subconsciously slow down. So it may not be a true tale of what's going on out there. I know there is speeding. Mostly the decision is a recommendation by the Public Safety Committee. The committee takes a look and discusses the different areas and potential for speed, and they'll recommend to me, well, we ought to move the signs to this location and that location. And in general, I've just said, fine, because they're out there really looking to see where the potential problems are. Let them know that, you've observed considerable speeding in an area, and it'd be helpful to put a sign. Now, some of the areas around here are really not conducive to the signs, so we just have to keep that in mind. But in most cases, if you have a recommendation, they'll consider it. The philosophy with our security right now is that they actually are a security force. They're not a police force. So if there's any kind of an incident where there's potential harm, damage, that kind of thing, they are supposed to contact the sheriff's department. If there's a family dispute, that kind of a thing, they're not supposed to be entering a home. If they think it's a dangerous situation, again, call the sheriff's department. If there's a stop on patrol and they obviously see someone is under the influence, they would call the sheriff's department or highway patrol and have them deal with it. There have been people in here that have been stopped and been cited and taken away because they were under the influence. If it's a basic rule violation or a complaint about something, you should call security. If it's a crime type of situation, you should call 911, not security. Go straight to 911. So I just have to get a mindset that, security is here to enforce our rules, not to be police. We do have highway patrol in here, and they do have authority to cite. I don't know if anybody's been cited by highway patrol, but if you see one and you're speeding in here, you have the potential of getting a ticket. So if we want to move on to the operations, when I think of this area, I basically think of the community center, and that's certainly not all of the operations department. Andrew Stedman is our director of community operations, and he and his team oversee the community center as far as booking events, maintenance of the place on a janitorial, housekeeping basis. And then, of course, it extends out to the pool, where their responsibility is for oversight of the pool as far as not the maintenance portion, but the lifeguards and the events here. There are a lot of the different social events are put on by committees, but a lot by whether it's a committee or the association. Andrew and his team are the ones that schedule it, set it up, tables, chairs, whatever it is. Outside of decorations, usually committees or clubs are doing decorations. That department also deals with the tennis and any of the other recreational responsibilities around here. What we do is, in a lot of cases, we try to use our staff's abilities and knowledge. And so there are times, for example, the operations director oversees a lot of the safety issues. The reason is that Andrew happens to have a lot of training in safety. And so he's been assigned to be co-chair of our safety committee and deal with OSHA and that sort of thing from the recreational aspects. So if you can see that this department really has a wide variety of responsibilities, all the way from safety to recreation to booking to cleaning and Halloween. I almost forgot about that. That's coming up here. Actually, that's a pretty big job to get the Halloween event set up here, because unlike most communities that I've managed, Halloween's Halloween, and all the kids go to the doors and knock on the doors and get their treats. Well, as you know, here it's set up and scheduled on a block area. This year it's Strawberry Circle. So Andrew and his team need to go door to door and see who's going to participate. Volunteers get together and handle tables that are. But that's just an example of the kind of things that Andrew Stedman and his team are dealing with. And it spreads through quite a range of responsibilities. So if you have any need to book a room here or deal with a recreational event, that sort of thing, the best thing to do is call here or come in here first. And if they're not handling it, they can almost certainly, direct you in the proper area. So let's go on to golf and parks. And actually, I kind of go from that area to the pro shop, because as I said, they really, the golf maintenance and pro shop have to work together closely. That's the outline that was done by our agronomist, Bill Hamilton. He's ordinarily a person like Bill would be called the golf course superintendent, but he is an agronomist and he is also in charge of the parks. So that's how we got the title. In regard to the parks, I guess I could say that's a fairly simple task. I don't know that anything's simple, but it's essentially, if you have a lawn in your front yard, you have to mow it and you have to trim it and you have to take care of the irrigation, you have to fertilize, you have to be concerned about pesticides and insecticides and that sort of thing. So that's essentially what goes on in the parks here on a much larger scale than, say, your front or backyard if you have a lawn. It entails working around events too, so an awful lot of coordination needs to take place to make sure the irrigation's not going off in the middle of a concert. Now that parks group also does the beach maintenance, in that I imagine most of you have read about the fact that we have a little bit of a goose problem here, or challenge. There are no problems, right? So they do pick up the goose poop on a regular basis, and groom the beaches and that sort of thing. So it extends all the way from the grass area into the sand area. And now they've expanded their responsibilities in that, recently there was a dog that got a fish hook in him, and it was a very expensive procedure to get the fish hook out. So what we're doing now is we're dragging the beaches and grass areas with a very powerful magnet to pick up these fish hooks. We didn't have any knowledge that there were fish hooks out there and there was a problem until this event happened, and now we're doing everything we can to prevent that from happening again. This was a goose dog that happened to get hooked, and that's really, really unfortunate. Now, the golf maintenance seems about as simple. If you've never had anything to do with a golf course maintenance, you would think that it's the same as a park, right? You just cut the grass and trim, and that's all there is to it. I can tell you it is far more complicated than basic turf management. There's so much to it that it really takes somebody that not only has the knowledge, but has the anticipation to see what might be coming up, to notice, oh, I've got a certain fungus, just the first signs of a fungus or some other infestation in the turf area. We're very fortunate to have somebody who has that kind of, it's almost like extrasensory perception. He sees things before they happen. So it really takes that kind of person to keep a golf course the way that our golf course is. It's a real challenge because most of these communities, ones that I've managed in the past and this one, they're typically not built properly. What they do, if you go to a very nice club, what they'll do typically is they'll go in and grade, and then they'll bring in good topsoils. I mean, considerable. It could be a foot or two, and make sure that the base is very, very healthy. And then they'll do the turf, and the greens will be done per USGA standards, which is very expensive. Typical communities, what happens is the developers come in and they grade and they put the turf down. And you never know what kind of soils are down there. I mean, it could be nothing but rock. It could be a bunch of just garbage type of soils, where then you really have a tough time with turf management. Same with the greens, is that typically in a community like this, the greens are push-up greens, they call them, and that's just basic construction rather than a multi-layered construction that I won't go into, but it's much more complicated. In addition to the actual course maintenance itself, there's also all the equipment maintenance. Bill does all the purchasing for the major equipment, and I don't know if you have any inkling of how expensive and complicated golf course equipment is, but mowers can run into the $30,000-$40,000 range. So it's not exactly like the push mower that you might use on your front lawn. They're intricate, and they do last a long time as long as they're properly maintained. They can last several years, and that's with daily use. And then there's also projects, various projects with culverts maintenance and golf cart, the paths, replacing them and repairing them, and that sort of thing. So there's a huge range of responsibilities. And then the golf course maintenance individual has to work with the pro shop too in just the daily golf, and making sure that if there's a tournament going on, that it's properly prepared and ready for the tournament. Jim Knight is our pro here, and he's on a contract basis. And I don't know if that's common knowledge, but the association has a contract with Jim, and he is completely responsible for the pro shop. They have to take care of all of the annual players, the daily, the tee sheets that organize the golf play. So he does all that part of it, he and his team. They also take care of all the merchandise. So they do the purchasing, all of the stocking, and of course all the revenue also goes to Jim and his team. In addition to the merchandise, he also takes care of the not the turf maintenance, but everything else related to the driving range. So he buys the balls, he owns the ball machine, and takes care of, if you play golf, there are pads out there and that sort of thing. He has to purchase those, replace them, that kind of thing. And he also takes care of the carts. They belong to the association, but the carts that are rented, he's responsible to make sure they're properly maintained, and he does get a percentage of the cart rental. So it's a situation to where it's maybe 6 of one, half a dozen of the other as to whether or not having him on contract or paying him as an employee is better or worse for the association. It probably would come out about the same either way. It's just a matter that more of the responsibility is handed to Jim Knight and his team. And of course, they get quite a bit of the revenue too. Now the association gets all of the golf play revenue. They get no percentage of that. So anything that's the annual passes and the daily play all comes to the association. On to Public Works and the lake. This is an area where the two basic responsibilities here are the daily maintenance of all the facilities. So if we need a repair of some kind, if it's a minor electrical or plumbing or painting or wood repair, all those little miscellaneous things, Public Works Department takes care of all of that sort of thing. The other portion of this department's responsibility is contracting out the major jobs. Most of you know we've had major work with culverts, actually a lot of it in my front yard. So it's really been a lot of fun the last few months. Over in Unit 4, that's several hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that drainage work done. So we have things like the culverts, the street work. We're having a major dam repair right now. And we've had a major expense on a valve that was just put into the dam. The lake's being lowered now, and the desilting's going to take place. All those projects like that are the responsibility of the Director of Public Works. Not only is it a diverse responsibility, but it's the responsibility of overseeing multi-millions of dollars of infrastructure. It's amazing how much in the way of assets this community has. So essentially, all of you can consider yourself multimillionaires because this is all yours while you live here. That dam is incredibly expensive. And the thing is, I don't want to be doom and gloom because that dam will be there for a long time. But if and when it goes in a few hundred years from now or whenever it is, it's not going to be replaced. There's just no way that with the regulations today that you could build a dam like that. So it's incredibly important to do the kind of work we're doing right now. Whenever we see deterioration, we need to get on top of it quickly, because you can make that thing last for probably a few thousand years if you really maintain it. Essentially, we keep a close eye on it and have it inspected annually. So if there are any issues, we know about those issues, at least within reason. I mean, if there was something that we couldn't detect, obviously, then there's not much that we can do about it. But anything that can be detected is brought out in the inspections. And then, like we did this year, the management highly recommends and tries to get the work done quickly. And so that's why we're doing it now. But outside of the valve that needed to be replaced in this work on the spillway, right now, from inspections and observations, the dam is in good shape. The Public Works Committee has been tasked with putting a specific plan together, and management and the committee were all aware that more desilting needs to be done and a plan needs to be put together so that we can actually much better budget in the reserves, put money away in the reserves to assure that that desilting is done. And actually, I don't know how far it'll go, but I think it's worth looking into, is that the committee will be looking into actually having a desilting pond constructed, and that would be constructed prior to the entry of the lake at Deer Creek. If it's feasible in any way, well, you have to, one, consider finances, and two, whether or not it's actually feasible from a architectural or geological perspective. It would save a tremendous amount of money, and in many cases, it would alleviate the need to lower the lake to desilt, and the desilting could take place anytime during the year. According to an engineering firm that rated the road systems, what we're trying to do is do a certain portion every year, and the worst ones first. And this is based on a third-party engineering company. If you really see problems, maybe there's an oversight on the part of the engineering or our staff. You may want to put a call into the director and let them know that there's some deterioration that maybe we haven't observed. I think probably people are more familiar with food and beverage than anything else, because if nothing else, we all eat and drink. So there's three basic areas of responsibility as far as the operations that are for the end user, and that's the restaurant, the bar, and the banquets. And each one of those is important to the overall operation. As any of you know, that again is a financial thing, that operation has been a challenge financially. It is getting better, but it still is a challenge. And what I can say, at least for the most part, and I would say that there's probably about a 95% satisfaction rate with food and service. That doesn't mean that there aren't snafus at times. Sometimes I don't know how they do it, because there are some huge crowds that get there, and everybody gets there at one time. And I know I've had to wait for an order or a drink at times. So I know they're trying to figure out the level of patronage at different times, and I think it's getting better and better. We're also working very hard on the banquet area, in that I think there's a lot of misunderstandings of what the banquet department can and can't do. And Dustin Wright, who's the department director, and I, well, we're working together on a number of things, but a big focus just recently has been banquets and trying to market banquets the best that we can to the general membership, but also get back with the clubs and get a better understanding there. The head of any kind of organization with the banquets now, Andy Miller is really seems to know how to work with people well, and I think that's incredibly important. You know, I do have to mention, beyond what you see, and I know, actually, we have somebody right here in the front row, Danny, who used to manage the clubhouse. There's a lot more than what you see. That's the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's scheduling, there's purchasing, there's receiving, there's all sorts of punch lists for setup, for breakdown, for cleaning, for, I mean, it's much more extensive than you might think to operate an efficient food and beverage operation. So, you know, what I'd love to do sometime is have, say, Dustin or someone of responsibility, maybe Dustin and our chef, do a back of the scenes type of tour and explanation of what goes on. I think it would really be eye-opening to so many of you that haven't been involved in the restaurant business. I think a lot of times people that live outside don't think about the fact that if they know somebody in here, they can get a sponsored banquet in here. If they're getting married or they have an anniversary, or it's a business type of event, they can call their friend here and say, hey, you know, our ABC business would love to have our annual whatever function, and would you be willing to sponsor me? Well, we can bring them in. We've had several events like that. We've had at least 3 or 4 weddings, and we have another couple coming up soon. None of those people live here, but either their parents or a good friend lives here. We've had the board of, was it the board of realtors? And I know one of the realty companies had an event here. So some of these functions are taking place because we're starting to get the word out that it is possible. And that's, in my opinion, and only because it's black and white, that's very important to you as residents here. I know you, in some ways, you don't want people from the outside in here. However, banquets are extremely profitable when done, let's say, for a wedding. I mean, we had 2 weekends ago, we had 2 weddings, and you know, it was somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 revenue. So that kind of a thing just offsets your contribution that you have. Okay, admin, accounting, human resources. Our director of administration and communications put together a very organized layout of what that department does. And you can see the major areas of responsibility are the communications and web administrator, all the IT type of things, or a good deal of them. And then we have a lot of data and tracking for fees for the campground, for the boat storage, for the marina, tennis, etc. And then we have receptionist, and that's multifaceted with all sorts of different responsibilities, with phone calls and people that come in and working with the new tenants. And then we have new homeowners. We have anywhere from about 10 new transfers to 30 in a month. And you might not think that that is a big load, but you'd be surprised how much goes into someone selling their property and getting a new person in here. Some of you have been through it maybe recently, some of you years ago, and I'm not sure how it was handled then, but it does entail not only a transfer of data and putting in the new owners' names and addresses and phone numbers and all of the other people that live in the household and the guests and that, but it also entails a meeting that's usually about a half hour to 45 minutes with the new owner to go over all of the responsibilities and what's available and that sort of thing here. So it's basically, it ends up being several hours to transfer one owner to another, and big undertaking. When you have 30 of those in a month, it's probably a part-time job at that point, to where it takes up half of your time as a full-time employee. And then we have the security, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier. We have a part-time person who takes care of all of the updating that's related to security, putting in new tenants into the system, putting in new owners, passes, that sort of thing, taking the photos of the passes. This right now, with some of the data, we actually have to enter 3 times. That's how inefficient our system is. Jonas is our main accounting system, where our main data is for billing. But then when there is a change that's related, that needs to go into the security operation, then the staff needs to actually put it in another program called FileMaker and another one called WinPack. So instead of just putting in information into Jonas and having it upload or migrate over to the other software, we actually have to manually input it. Obviously, that's got to change, and that's something that we're looking forward to desperately. I'll go on to accounting, and this is an area that I've never quite experienced the trials and tribulations that we have here with accounting. Ever since I've got here, we've continually been implementing our new system, Jonas, which has really been challenging. But it's about 95% complete now and starting to work really well. It's been time consuming for both our accounting department and others. But besides that challenge, a huge amount of time that our accounting department spends is in collections. Just as a comparison, the last place where I worked, we had less than 1% delinquencies. Every once in a while, we might file a lien. I don't know that we ever started a foreclosure in the 8 to 9 years I was there. We have our accounts receivable person who probably spends at least half of her time dealing with the delinquencies. Just It's just so time consuming. Part of this is because we do have current delinquencies, and we do have, some payments that are monthly, some that are quarterly, some that are annual, and a lot of people switch back and forth on their annual assessments, quarterly to annual, which is time consuming and sometimes confusing. But aside from that, with the collections, there was a significant collection issue that wasn't really dealt with for a number of years until the last 2 or 3 years, and a concerted effort's been made, and we're making a tremendous amount of progress. But again, really time consuming. So with the kind of operation we have here, with that sort of thing, with the Jonas conversion, and with a lot of fees that we have, where a lot of communities don't have the kind of fees we have. I mean, if you want to use the pool, you go use the pool. If you want to play tennis, you go play tennis or pickleball. There are no fees associated. I'm not saying that's a good or bad or black or white thing. All I'm saying is that what it does is it requires accounting and time consumption on the part of staff. So here, in order to keep our heads above water, we'll have 4 people in the accounting department. The last place that I worked with a similar budget, but without all these fees and collection issues, we were able to handle accounting with 1.5. So you can see how there's really a much greater workload here with the model we have than with some other large community models. It is what it is until you change it, and we're not talking about what we could do or whether or not we want to make any changes. But we do have a huge workload there. And I have to say, I'm proud of the ladies that are in the accounting department now, because when I got here, I can tell you it was an absolute turmoil, and things, we were behind by 2-3 months in getting financial statements out, and that was the tip of the iceberg. Now we're on time. Things are accurate, collections are taking place, and they're working very efficiently. Okay, HR, policy administration, payroll, benefits, staffing, recruitment, safety, employee relations, and admin support. Basically, our HR manager has to make sure that we have, for example, a good, solid, legal, up-to-date handbook, and that we're compliant with all the California laws, which are just overwhelming and ever-changing. It's just constant. And so she really is good at that. She's got considerable experience in HR. And the last place that she worked was for a legal firm. So she got an awful lot of legal knowledge in working for that firm. As you can see, she does an incredible amount in getting all of the payroll set for the accounting department. And then benefits administration is a big responsibility in dealing with all of our health, our medical, our dental, vision, all that sort of thing. Putting those policies in place takes a lot of time every year, especially if we make a change, which we did just recently, and we now have better coverage for less money than we did a year ago. And then all the issues that come up. Typically, instead of the employee going to the insurance company, they end up coming back to Holly, our manager, and so she's dealing with a lot of these types of things. And then she does a tremendous amount of the work with the staffing, recruiting, sending the notices out, taking part in some of the interviews. I know with the Director of Public Works, I had Holly help me with the interviews and that because I like her feedback. So she's got a very diverse area and very important one that most of you are not going to deal with, obviously, because she's dealing with employees, but she's a real anchor to having a good staffing. The one area that I just wanted to talk about briefly is with fire issues and evacuation. I think in last year when the fire took place, a lot of people think our security and our staff can just direct and tell everybody exactly what to do. Well, to a degree we can, but we are at the beck and call of the authorities. The Sheriff's Department, the Highway Patrol, they basically end up telling us for a large part what to do, how we can route traffic, and they're fully in charge of how traffic is routed outside of Lake Wildwood. So there are times when we just don't have the ability to do what we might want to do, although we have to trust that they're instructing us properly, and we do have to follow their lead. Well, thank you for your time, and hopefully I conveyed a little information that maybe you didn't know before and that will interest you further in getting more.